Hey guys, welcome to Chapter 7 Vocab Video. The first word is metabolism. Now metabolism is just the sum of all the chemical reactions that are going on in a cell or in an organism. And metabolism consists of two different branches. There's anabolism and catabolism. So anabolism is building up things. It's any reactions that build larger molecules from smaller ones. And catabolism is the opposite. It's breaking down small molecules. So anabolism is building up, catabolism is breaking down. All of these chemical reactions, almost all of them, require enzymes in order to go at a rate that's fast enough to sustain life. So remember, enzymes are proteins that act as catalysts. They speed up chemical reactions. Enzymes bind to the chemicals that are undergoing the chemical reactions in order to speed it up. So anything that binds to an enzyme is known as a substrate. So substrates are just molecules, things that bind to enzymes. Now, a lot of enzymes require additional pieces in order to work. We call these things coenzymes or cofactors, depending on their chemical structure. Vitamins act as coenzymes, and minerals act as cofactors. So a lot of the vitamins and minerals that you eat on a daily basis that you need, that are essential for life, are essential because they help enzymes function, various enzymes function. And those enzymes are called conjugated enzymes. In other words, they're conjugated with this other particle, the sort of sidekick that they need in order to function properly. Now, you don't usually need all the enzymes in your body all the time. So we have ways to regulate our enzymes. So regulated enzymes are ones that are sometimes made and sometimes aren't. They're only around if we actually need them. So a classic example of this is the enzymes needed for lactose metabolism, both in bacteria but even in humans. Right? So these enzymes are only produced when you are in the presence of lactose, and then they get turned off. So like 70% of the world's human population is lactose intolerant, meaning that at some point after infancy, they lose the production of lactase enzyme. So that's because most mammals have evolved to not need milk after infancy. We are the weirdos that decided to domesticate other mammals and drink their milk for sustenance. So some of us have learned to regulate our lactase enzyme long term. Yay us. There are other enzymes that you need constantly. So a constitutive enzyme, constitutive kind of sounds like constant. So it's one that's always around. So for example, glucose, all of our cells rely on glucose. We use glucose for energy. So all of the enzymes that are needed for glycolysis, they're always on, they're always around, they're always ready. Unlike regulated enzymes, which are only made when needed. All right, enzymes, of course, are made of protein, and proteins can become denatured. They can unfold if they are exposed to heat or acid or agitation. So denaturation is a word to unfold proteins, which could also then deactivate enzymes. So enzymes can also be inhibited. They can be turned off or inhibited. The two major types of inhibitors are competitive and non-competitive inhibitors. So competitive inhibition involves an inhibitor that looks a lot like the normal substrate for the enzyme, and it tricks the enzyme and it binds to the active site of the enzyme, and then the enzyme can't work or it can't bind its normal substrate, so it inhibits the process that way. Competitive inhibitors can also, that word compete means that inhibitor is competing with the natural substrate. So you can outcompete it by just adding more natural substrate. So anyway, the key thing is it competes. What's competitive is it competes for the active site, and it does that by mimicking the natural substrate, looking a lot like it. Non-competitive inhibitors do not compete for the active site. They bind somewhere else on the enzyme and prevent the enzyme from working from a totally different site. Chemical reactions can be exergonic or endergonic, or the other terms for that are exothermic and endothermic. They're not exactly the same term, but They're similar. So exergonic or exothermic reactions are ones that give off energy. Energy is released. They often feel hot to the touch, whereas endergonic reactions absorb heat. Okay, so exergonic reactions are going to be those of catabolism. Breaking things down, breaking bonds actually releases energy, which sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but that's how it is. Endergonic reactions, ones that use energy, those are going to be anabolic reactions. Building things takes energy to do. Now, redox reactions are a very common type of chemical reaction that involves exchange of electrons. So redox stands for reduction and oxidation. Reduction is loss of electrons. Oxidation is gain of electrons. And when one molecule loses electrons, there's always some other molecule there to accept those electrons. So they always happen hand in hand, reduction and oxidation. Hence the nickname redox reactions. Another type of chemical reaction that's really important in metabolism is phosphorylation. And it's a big word, but all it means is to add a phosphate group to something. So phosphates can be added or subtracted to enzymes to turn them on or off. And we'll also see phosphorylation happening of a very important molecule, ATP. So the different types of respiration we'll talk about are aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. So aerobic means in the presence of oxygen or air. So aerobic respiration requires oxygen. And anaerobic respiration does not. So it takes place in the absence of oxygen. And they have different products that we'll get to in class. And then fermentation is also a type of anaerobic respiration that can result in the production of lactic acid or acids or alcohol, ethanol. The probably most important metabolic reaction to know, because it's central to all living things, is glycolysis. Glycolysis is a 10-step reaction pathway that allows us to turn glucose into pyruvic acid or pyruvate, which is a precursor for both anaerobic and aerobic respiration, whichever path you end up going down. But glycolysis is sort of the first step in most energy production for most cells. All right, so at the end, so we have glycolysis, the citric acid cycle, and the electron transport chain. Those are sort of the three main pathways in metabolism, or at least in aerobic metabolism. Oxidative phosphorylation is what happens, the last step of the electron transport chain, where ATP is actually made. So oxidative phosphorylation refers to the specific reaction where ADP gets phosphorylated into ATP. Adenosine diphosphate becomes adenosine triphosphate. And there's an oxidation reaction that happens that ends up fueling this, which is the phosphorylation reaction. So oxidative phosphorylation is the fancy chemistry way of saying making ATP at the end of the electron transport chain. And then the last chemical reaction to know vocabulary-wise is beta oxidation, which I liken to the glycolysis of fatty acids. So fats are also a source of energy, not just glucose. And ultimately with glycolysis, we take glucose and we end up converting it into something called acetyl-CoA. I said, well, technically we convert it to pyruvate or pyruvic acid, and then in another step, we convert it to acetyl-CoA. So glycolysis, glucose becomes acetyl-CoA. Beta oxidation is how we take fatty acids and convert them to acetyl-CoA, which is a precursor for the rest of the metabolic pathways. So it's sort of like glycolysis for lipids, for fatty acids. Okay? The end.